60% of the American public is about to lose everything they have. People living paycheck to paycheck are about to go broke. The GDP numbers came in yesterday, and of course the economy receded, which I predicted 2 months ago, and people laughed. Mark my words, the second quarter is going to be far worse. Tariffs on Chinese products at 145% are about to kick in, which means everything you buy from China on Amazon or elsewhere is about to go through the roof. Grocery store shelves are starting to empty at Walmarts across the country, and of course grocery prices continue to soar. People who've been financing groceries on credit are starting to default on those payments. We are about to see an economic catastrophe. If you're in this 60% that has little or no money, please stop spending money. Protect your family. Trump does not care about you. Even if you voted for him, he's a billionaire. He won't suffer, but you and your family will. Please protect yourself.
What's happening? Question is, how broke is America? Um, I've talked about this for years about the deficit and how this stuff is going to affect people. And the question, and I was doing it from looking at the economy, observing everyday life and observing people, right? And seeing what's going on. And this is what I've noticed. I've noticed for years, like I've noticed people leaving major cities to go live in southern states for cheaper living. That has been going on ever since the deficit started. So, people have been moving to Georgia, people have been moving to Tennessee, people moving to Texas, Carolina, that type of stuff. From like L.A., Chicago, New York, Ohio, sometimes places that just the economy wasn't as good. St. Missouri, I've seen people do that. Over the years, I saw how they were building less houses and more apartments, and I was like, "Yo, the apartments is going up. The apartments is going up." And some people got it, some people didn't, right? Then, I saw how people were buying groceries with credit cards a lot. It was like it's either credit cards or food stamps. But there were groups of people who, and this is where it started getting interesting to me. Also, is being in Texas, people could buy trucks. So when I started seeing less and less trucks, because for years they'll tell you the gas price is going up, and when they tell you that, you'll see people with a Suburban, Expedition, F-150, F-250, Ram 1500. You know what I'm saying? Silverado. But they just if you're smart, you got a Tundra probably. At a certain point, but you would see that over and over again. Big, these big cars. And then I talked about how they weren't selling cars. The car lots were just getting bigger. The cars on the car lot, they just get bigger, 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 because they weren't selling. And people were buying used cars instead of new cars because the price of new cars was getting too high. And then they started raising the price of used cars. And now people just wasn't buying cars. And now what I see is this, even with that car thing. I used to see a lot of luxury cars. That has dwindled, very much so. You don't see that many 5 Series Benzes, 7 Series BMWs. They out here, you know, the Audis, the Lamborghinis. Like it just slowly dwindled down. I'm sure some of the people still got money. They just don't want to make themselves a target. And then I started seeing things like daycares closing, you know, and people say people are having less and less kids, but now when you start seeing daycares closing, it's like whoa. I'm about to start going into stuff. I started seeing the dating market get desperate in the sense of um, people were looking for people who not sometimes just made a lot of money, but had a stable income. That's it shifted. It shifted in a sense because people wanted to live off of another person, basically. And when people got political, they talked all this political stuff because people in social media and media who talk extremely political, usually they do that because the rage baiting brings views, and the just saying what people want to hear brings the views. But in a general sense, the people who are on these political views, like I'm gonna have more money in my pocket, that didn't work. Um, that's what I'm saying. How broke is America? But I'm saying from what I saw, um, right when they wanted to do the immigration thing with ICE, I was like, I knew this was gonna happen. You saw a lot of Hispanics like they just dipped out of the market. Like we ain't working, we out. And I saw a lot of. It's crazy to say it this way. I saw a lot of white guys who had construction companies, who had whether that be like the houses or the streets and whatnot. What you saw is no workers, but just the quote unquote supervisors just sitting out there, just big fat dudes just sitting out there just for days and days. And they weren't doing any work. And they weren't replacing the workers that didn't come to work. And then you saw businesses kind of go under. Some took a hit and some went under. And then, no, it's no nice way to say what I'm about to say. I'm trying to figure this out. And even when I talked about the political part, I saw a lot of you people who, well, you were so pro Trump and you had the flags and you was riding and y'all was beeping and horns and y'all was in these long caravans and y'all, yeah, we gonna make America great. Y'all, the worse the economy got, the flag started slowly going down to the point where it's like it's rare now. You saw the rise of OnlyFans, like people just out here like, you know, I'm selling it online, come and get it, and that when most of the people are not making any money, they just ruin their reputations. I saw even like with strippers, people thought strippers used to make money, not no more. Um, you saw real estate, like realtors. They brought that up recently. How um, you got realtors who haven't sold a property in a year because the market is just frozen per se. So you have that. You know what I mean? Um, you had all of these industries that thought we're gonna have all these layoffs, and they had layoffs and they got rid of people, but less and less people can afford to buy their products. So you saw the businesses take a hit as far as with that. You saw the tariffs, and you start people, tariffs is going to be a great thing, and now they're like, man, everything costs too much. It's like, yeah, and you see how society is slowly breaking down, and people can't afford to fix it. So when you ask how broke is America, like a year ago, I remember from the same guy, if I'm not mistaken, had a video of saying that Trump said, the economy is going to be kind of tight for a couple of years. And now with the rising prices of gas, it's like road rage is like, oh my God, like why are we out here? Gas costs too much. Like here it's cheaper than other places, I would say. I paid like $4.69 gallon, for premium or whatever. But I had to going somewhere with this, to tell my mother and my wife, like, don't go to the grocery store at night, because you start seeing people looking at people's carts and seeing people see. You started looking at people. You can start seeing people looking at what people were buying, and you can see people looking to see if people can pay at the register. Right? It's just people are basically pocket watching in the grocery store. So, and you have all of these people. I hate to say this, who now all of a sudden want society to come together, and now people want to turn to God. And that's because you know financially they're behind the eight ball, and now we need to be friends. And then when I asked the question at the beginning, how broke is America? You're seeing, and you're seeing the quiet quitting. I forgot about that part, the quiet quitting. And I didn't understand y'all quitting jobs. Now y'all need them, but who y'all gonna live off of? It's crazy, but it is what it is. So you're seeing society go broke. People don't want to participate in the society. People want to just live a leisurely lifestyle, and it's like, and the debt keeps going up and up and up because all America is paying is the interest on it and not paying it down. So that makes the dollar weaker and weaker and weaker, and now you need more and more and more to be considered rich, and also the bar is super low for being poor now because you know interest has ruined the middle class. Not just interest, but raising costs has always chipped away at the middle class. So you got bigger poor section, you got smaller middle class, and you got a bigger upper class. So it's but the country's still broke. It's interesting, but I'm done. Peace.